Everyone. Thank you for joining us for this SEL parent event. This is the first time that we have done this, so we're really excited to see how it goes and also to plan more parent education things in the future, starring our wonderful and talented St. Paul's teachers. So first of all, just thank you so much for being here. We know that it takes a village to raise these kiddos. We're really grateful to be part of that village. Feel free to ask questions as we go. We're going to leave some time after each individual teacher's presentation for you to ask questions, but you can type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself at any time. We know you have a lot of expertise too, and we want to make sure we're sharing any questions you have, any challenges, and any tips you might have as a parent too. I'm going to introduce the teachers before we get started. They can give a little wave, starting with our toddler teachers, Miss Marston and Mrs. Hickey. Then on to preschool, Mrs. Bruns. Hi, Mrs. Bruns. And we also have a pre-K teacher here, Mrs. Minter. Hi, Mrs. Minter. I want to thank the teachers too, because it's been a long day and they were definitely in the classroom all day. And we did another one of these presentations this morning. So thank you guys for making it work at this time. So I'm going to first just give a quick SEL overview and then talk about some programs that we have at St. Paul's to support SEL. And then I'm going to, as quickly as possible, turn it over to the experts and let the teachers lead you through their area of expertise. All right, so let me share my screen here. The first thing I want to talk about is just why SEL, what is SEL, and where are these skills developed? So I know that SEL is kind of a buzzword. It stands for social emotional learning. We're really fortunate at St. Paul's because social emotional learning has always been a priority. We've been a little more intentional in the past several years about developing consistent programs throughout the school, toddler through 8th grade. The kids are hearing the same language. So there's a quote on here. I'm not going to read to you all these bullet points, but I do want to read the quote from this book. It says, children who are socially and emotionally healthy tend to demonstrate and continue to develop several important behaviors and skills. You can see some of those. We could go on and on about those skills, but you can see some of them listed here, anywhere from being in a positive mood to being able to recognize, label, and manage their emotions, whatever that emotion might be. So another thing that we try to really teach here is that no emotions are bad or good. They can be comfortable or uncomfortable, but they're never just bad or good. We have several programs here at St. Paul's that support building these skills. You can see them here. I'm not going to talk about them in detail because, again, that could be a whole nother topic just about our programming. But in early childhood, we use conscious discipline, sunshine circles, ruler, and then we have a couple other supplementary programs too, such as Second Step and in toddler Sing, Play, Love. We are mainly focusing on conscious discipline today. So you're going to hear the teachers talk about research and data and strategies that come from conscious discipline. Conscious discipline is not actually a curriculum. We do have that through ruler and Second Step that has actual lessons to teach to our kids in the classroom. Conscious discipline is strategies and a philosophy about teaching our children to be emotionally intelligent, self-regulated, and to have self-control. So we use a lot of classroom management strategies all throughout the ECC and through the lower elementary grades too that help support conscious discipline. So the goal of all of this, if you think about social emotional learning and yourself as a grown-up, is to really be able to interact with yourself and others in a positive way. So as a grown-up, that might mean the ability to form positive relationships with others and positive connections. As a 5th grader, that might mean having enough self-control to understand the instructions on an assignment and sit down and finish that assignment in class. As a pre-K or kindergarten student, that might mean recognizing the emotions of others and having enough compassion and empathy to act if someone is having an uncomfortable emotion. And in toddler and preschool, that might mean just starting to be able to name your own emotions, whether it's happy or sad or excited. All of these are really difficult skills that take a lot of practice to master. We definitely weren't all born being masters of social emotional skills. All right, with that being said, I am going to first turn this over to Miss Marston, who's going to start us off with a presentation about naming our feelings. Okay, Miss Marston, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, Mindy, I haven't seen the slides go. It looks like it's just on the first slide. And Devin has said the same thing. I'm not sure if anybody else can see the
Okay,
slides going.
I'm going to share again. It was moving along for me,
Moving
but
along
we
for
all
Mrs.
know.
Stevenson.
But I don't need to see it. Okay, how about that? Can you see my screen?
Yep, I see naming
Okay.
feelings.
All
All
right, there we
right,
go.
great. Well, thank you all so much for being here. This is a topic, naming feelings, which is really highly emphasized in conscious discipline, and it's something that I'm really excited to talk to you all about. It's really, really fascinating and interesting, especially the brain science behind naming our feelings. So you can go on to the next slide. Perfect. So our emotions, we're going to start off base level. Our emotions and our feelings are essential. They are essential for our well-being. They're essential for our survival. They communicate to us whether we are on or off track. And at the end of the day, if we recognize and realize that our emotions are actually our friends, and if we learn to befriend our emotions and not resist our emotions, then we're going to be able to become more well-rounded individuals who can regulate themselves and have more problem solving abilities. One of the things that is emphasized in conscious discipline is that our emotions are energy in motion, meaning that they use up our whole body. They're going through our whole body when we're experiencing them. And so if we're trying to stop that, if we try to stop an emotion from happening, then we're preventing the wisdom that we gain from recognizing our emotions and learning to better cope with them and regulate them. So the conscious discipline brain state model is a really, really great visual, and it's really helpful, especially when we talk about our little ones and our not so little ones. So the conscious discipline brain model shows three parts of our brain. So you can see on this picture, the very front of our brain in the green, that's called the executive state. That is where our brilliance comes out. That's where our wisdom comes out. The message from our executive state is, what can I learn from this situation? How can I better myself? How can I problem solve? Excuse me. And then the blue part, or the middle part of our brain, this is in the lower half of our brain, and it's called our emotional state. And in our emotional state, when we get to that part of our brain, what we're seeking is connection. So the way that little ones seek connection, if they're in the emotional state of their brain, is maybe some back talk, maybe a little bit of sass, maybe a little bit of yelling, verbal reactions. And what they're really seeking in that moment is, am I loved? Do you see me? Please connect with me. And then the very back of our brain, the red, that lower part in the bottom half of our brain, that's called our survival state. That is when we are in fight, flight, or freeze. We are, a lot of people, experts call this our reptilian brain. When we're in the back of our brain, we are wanting to hide, we're wanting to fight, we're wanting to throw a tantrum. A lot of big feelings come from being in our survival state. A lot of physical reactions come from being in our survival state. And the main message when we are in our survival state, we're not thinking about anything else but safety. Am I safe? And as adults and later as kids, as we learn this as adults and then as we teach to children, it's really, really important for us to be aware and to know what triggers us. And what conscious discipline says is what sets our clacker off. So as you see the little hand clapper, I have a ridiculously large one that I got from Amazon that I didn't know was going to be this big, but here we are. And I think it really sends the message. So when we're triggered, that message goes to our brain, and we either go back to our emotional state. Am I loved or am I connected? Right? I need someone to show me that they care, to show me that they see me, or way to the back of our brain in our survival state. Am I safe? And our clacker is going off, right? Our heart is beating really fast. Our chest is tight. We're crying. We can feel the blood rushing to our hands, right? Sometimes when we're in our survival state, kids get really physical because that blood is pumping and it goes all the way to our hands, right? That's that fight response that we get. So it's important for us as adults to recognize what sets my clacker off, right? What triggers me. And then we can instill that in our own kiddos and help them recognize, whoa, you're triggered right now, you're having a hard time, and we're going to work through it. So the name it to tame it model or method is something that is widely used by a lot of brain scientists, and it's something that conscious discipline has adapted. And I'm just going to show a really short video, about 2 minutes, of a man named Dr. Dan Siegel. He is a professor of psychiatry at the UCLA School of Medicine. The beginning is a little bit jargony, but bear with me because he has a really, really great way of talking about naming our emotions and what that does in our brains and how it helps us to regulate.
All right, can you all see Dan Siegel on my screen? Great, here we go.
There are studies that everybody should know about that I summarize with the phrase, name it to tame it. So if you're really agitated, you're frightened of being rejected again, or you're really upset with what happened, or you're angry or whatever, in Maria's right brain, I can tell you this, in addition to right and left, there's, now please excuse these incredibly simplistic statements, but there's an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. Now, I'm fine with that for this parenting book, but believe me, my other foot is in science, and the scientists would see that and go, what? But the fact is, there's a cortical rim where a lot of this higher stuff goes on, and there's everything below the cortex. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your fingers and put your hands over the top, give this a try. This would be in my brain like this, see? And so this would be the cortex where you do all your thinking and planning and all that kind of stuff. If you lift up your cortex, you have everything below the cortex, which we call the downstairs brain. So that's reasonable. Downstairs is just a substitute for the word subcortical, which freaks parents out. So downstairs. And it's the upstairs brain is the cortex. Okay, so you lift up your upstairs brain, you go to your downstairs brain, that's the subcortex. It's the limbic area and it's the brainstem. These are very ancient circuits responsible for things like emotion and motivation and fight, flight, freeze reaction and your arousal states, whether you're awake or asleep, stuff like that. So what happens at that moment is, if we did a scan on your brain, we would say that your right amygdala and your limbic area and your downstairs brain, the downstairs brain is super active. Scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And studies show that if you have this kind of presence and of mind, I can get Maria's left brain to name the feeling from the downstairs brain. And you can show that she will squirt soothing neurotransmitters down to her right limbic area, right downstairs brain, and calm it down.
So what I love about this is, did you hear him go chick, 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 right? What sets our clacker off? What gets us down to the bottom half, our downstairs brain, whether it's the emotional state or whether it's the survival state? If we use our left brain, which is language centered and logic centered, to name that emotion, then we get soothing. We get a soothing response from the top of our brain, and it starts to slow our clacker down. Now, it doesn't stop the clacker. And that's an important thing to remember. We are not trying to stop a feeling from happening. We have to let our child's feelings be what they are, but we can help to get them back to a more self-regulated state so that they can solve whatever problem that they're having or talk to a grown-up about what is going on. So the DNA model or the DNA process by conscious discipline is something that is a great starting off point, not even a starting off point. I mean, I think I use this every day in my classroom to help a child figure out what is going on the inside, right? So the DNA process is D, describe. So this part always feels, or it felt at the beginning at least, least for me, a little bit awkward because you are describing, but you're also kind of mirroring what your child is doing, right? Your mouth is going like this and your shoulders are like this. You seem, so now we go to name, N is for name. You seem sad. You seem disappointed. And then A for acknowledge. So that is the part where we bring in empathy and we change our intent from my child is giving me a hard time because we're in the grocery store and everybody's hungry and we've got to get home for dinner and we need to straighten up and get through it, to my child is having a hard time and I need to take a moment to acknowledge that they're going through something. And that is so hard for us as adults. It's hard for me as a teacher. And so the importance of when your child is in a state like this, whether it be they're sad, they're angry, tantrums can be really, really triggering for adults. They can be triggering for me. We have to also practice as adults what Dr. Becky Bailey and what a lot of brain scientists call mirror neurons, which means that our child downloads whatever we're feeling, what we're going through. So if they're going up, up, up with a tantrum and we start to go up, up, up with them, they're only going to get higher in their energy and in their frustration. So they need to be able to download our calm. So sometimes before you even start the DNA process, you need to take your own little moment and go, okay, my chest is getting tight. This is a stressful situation. I'm going to make sure that I'm speaking to my child as calmly as I can and with the intent and the power of love, which means that I'm going to see my child as good with their behavior and that they are just needing me and needing my connection. I'm going to describe, your hands are in your face like this. You seem scared. You wanted mommy to go with you. And now you're feeling scared because you're in the classroom without mommy and I have to go to work. You've got this. You can handle this. It makes sense that you feel this way. It makes sense is a great phrase. And I've been using it a lot lately with my kiddos. It makes sense that you're so angry. You wanted that car. You were walking right towards it and someone else took it. And you had plans with that car. Now, the thing is about using the DNA process is when we describe, name, and acknowledge, we then get to a more neutral state with your child so that then you can solve the problem. Breathe with me. I'm right here. You've got this. Now let's figure out what we can do and what we can, how we can solve the problem. I failed to mention this morning, and so I want to mention it again. With the DNA process, we talked about the brain science between name it to tame it, which is I just think is so cool. But another scientific aspect to the DNA process is that when you are physically describing, your mouth is like this, your eyes are like this. Not only does your child typically 9 times out of 10 stop and look at you, they want to see what you're doing, right? They want to see the face that you're making. So then you get an opportunity to connect, but both describing and acknowledging you wanted, you were hoping, you were wishing, that engages both the left and right sides of the brain. It's just like crossing the midline. So when you're crossing the midline and you're engaging both the left and right hemispheres of your child's brain, they are able to problem solve in a much clearer state and a better way. So not only is this an opportunity with the DNA process to connect with your child and to allow them to feel seen, heard, loved, connected, you're also doing so much in their brains. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Mindy. You're doing so much for their brains. And the more that you do it, I know on this next slide, I said this takes repetition. The more you do it, the more they're going to grow and the more that their regulation and their problem solving skills are going to develop. But this takes repetition and this takes time. So this model of naming our feelings is not a magic wand, one chance or one time fix all sort of solution. We're not going to just say you seem angry and all of a sudden they're not angry anymore, right? We're not trying to stop feelings. We're trying to help them to manage and regulate them. And the biggest thing is we're trying to connect with them, to let them know that first of all, what they're going through is something that they can handle. You've got this. breathe with me. And then another thing to emphasize is that I'm right here. You're not going to have to go through this feeling alone. I'm right here with you. All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Thank you, Ms. Marston. I'm going to pause there just in case anyone has any specific questions about naming your feelings.
I just wanted to say, this is probably not the most constructive comment because it's kind of late in the day for that for me, but I know in our household, we try, not always perfect, to do kind of the respectful, the RIE parenting. And I feel like a lot of what you just went through is really similar, but what was so helpful is it went through kind of like the science or like the brain science behind it, which is really nice because previously I'd been like, oh, this is what the person online said to do. I didn't have that like kind of that basic like context of how it connects to the brain. So I found that really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Any more questions, comments? All right, thank you so much, Ms. Marston. We are going to move on to our next portion of the presentation, which is when Mrs. Hickey is going to talk about a strategy called I Love You rituals. All right, Mrs. Hickey.
Hi. I would like to talk to you about ways that you can fill your child's bucket, and this also fills your bucket as a parent. This is the I love you rituals are special moments that you can do with your child. Some of them are high energy, some of them are soothing. They're not necessarily things that you can do right in the middle of a tantrum. So these are things that you can preemptively do to make your child feel safe, loved, and connected, just like Emma was saying. At the end of the day, we know that we all do very, very special things for our kids. We make special food, we have special experiences, we give them amazing things, and sometimes we expect for them to run off and play with their great toys that they just got for Easter. But at the end of the day, what they really, really want is you. They want to connect with you. And this doesn't end when they're babies. That face-to-face time, that touch is still really important for kids of all ages. And the best toy is you. Our relationships are the very first building blocks for learning. Kids, we can keep repeating it, need to feel safe, loved, connected, supported in order for their brain to develop and to feel like they can take on challenges. So face-to-face contact interaction is brain food for kids. And these I love you rituals are designed to connect adults and children, but you'll discover when you start using them with your kids, they'll be doing it with their baby dolls or stuffed animals, with their friends, with you. Okay, the next slide. These are intentional social games, and there are 4 elements. They are face-to-face. That eye contact is really important. They involve touch. They are very playful, and they require your presence. So these are not things that you can do while you're washing dishes or in the car. They really require you to really sit down and have an intentional moment where you're sitting on the floor, or on the couch, or in a bed with your child. We do this naturally with babies. Peekaboo and This Little Piggy are examples that a lot of people are familiar with. And some of the examples that I'll share are for older kids, because I think that when a child grows and is like 5, you think, oh, they don't want to play these silly little games with me anymore. But they do. They crave your attention. They crave that connection. And if you think about as an adult, even with your spouse or friend or coworker, when you feel disconnected, how you're looking to feel seen and heard, and spending one-on-one time with someone energizes us and makes us feel seen and loved and connected. Mindy, will you play the video? This is an example of one that's very popular.
I'll start.
And I'll play with you.
Thank you. You'll find that when you introduce these, your child wants to do it over and over and over again. That was one of my favorites to do with my sons when they were little on the changing table. And I would do round and round the garden around their belly button and then tickle under their chin. You can do it on their hands, and they'll love doing it with you too. I think that the next one, is about the benefits. So it promotes connection. It increases attention span. A lot of these, there are wait times. They are sensing the anticipation, waiting for the tickle. And so it increases that self-regulation. And it also decreases power struggles. If you fill your child's bucket and you make them feel like you've spent a lot of if you fill your child's bucket and you have these moments of connection earlier in the day before you have to do something difficult, they will be more inclined to listen, to follow directions, to be flexible, and it's a win-win for everyone. These are different examples. You will have these slides after the presentation. You'll get this recording. I won't show this longer video, but it's one of my favorites, and I cry every time I see it with a Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star example. It's a song I sing with my kids at home and with the kids at school. So there are different categories of I love you rituals. There are positive nursery rhymes where they've rewritten all those familiar kind of strange nursery rhymes that we grew up with in a more positive light. The interactive finger plays like Round and Round the Garden, and some silly interactions that are fun to kind of break the mood when your child's feeling grumpy, like this yes and no game. We go to the next slide, Mindy. And then there are soothing and relaxing games. The story hand is one of my favorites for a child with anxiety, using their hand to tell a story, and then you close it up and say, of course, we always knew you could do it. There's more details at that link with more instructions if you want to learn how to do that. Hide and seek games. Can you find it? This is a great one that causes a lot of giggles. Your child lays or sits down, and you can hide cotton balls or little pieces of food, or they hide cotton balls and pieces of food, and then you try to find them, and you're really playful with it. Row, row, row your boat is something that Miss Finley does often in Sunshine Circle, and the kids love it. She does kind of a variation on it where you sing and we all scoot forward, and then there's a big hug at the end, but you can do it in your lap where you're the boat and there's stormy weather and you start shaking around. Again, it's cuddling and snuggling, but it causes a lot of laughter, and the kids enjoy having that anticipation of getting to the end and rowing closer. And then the last category is physically interactive games. Blanket volleyball is an example of that. It's more high energy, but again, we are involving the self-regulation. We're using signals or words to start the idea of throwing a balloon or a softball up in the air while you're holding a blanket. So they have to wait until you signal the go, and then the goal is to catch it together. Next slide. So your main takeaway is trying to find a 10-minute miracle in your day. I saw that online sometime, and it's really stuck with me, the idea of just carving out 10 special minutes in your day where your focus is 100% on your child or children, where you're making eye contact and you are very present in the moment. And hearkening back to what Emma said, this just changes the pathways in their brain. It creates new neural pathways. It strengthens their safety. It puts them in a state where they feel safe and loved.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Hickey. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so that if anyone has any questions about I love you rituals, they can ask them now. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Hickey. Next up is Mrs. Bruns, who is going to talk about a strategy called the visual schedule. All right, Mrs. Bruns.
Hi, I'm sure glad everybody's here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the visual daily schedule. Creating a visual daily schedule can help a child understand what's going to come next. So, when you want to do this, if a child is struggling with a part of the day, then you might want to set up a little schedule to help them go through it. Our brain is pattern seeking, so our brain is always looking for a pattern. And if we can instill a pattern for a child, it helps them to know what's coming next and to keep them up in that front part of their brain where they're learning at. Um, Having a visual daily schedule will help reduce conflict because the child knows what's next, they know what's coming up, and they aren't questioning, well, what's coming next. They're not anxious about it, they know what to expect. And it allows us not to have to constantly say, well, what do you do? Go get your shoes on 500 times in the same breath as we're all excited and we're amping up because they're not doing what we're expecting of them. They're amping up. It allows us to just calmly say, okay, go check the schedule. What do you do next? And that puts the power back on them instead of the power being on us. We want to lay out to make a schedule. You want to look and see, is there a part of the day that my child really struggles with? Maybe it's getting to school in the morning where everybody is rushed trying to get everything together. You could lay out a visual schedule just for that part of the day to get your child used to the idea. Now, we all have visual schedules in our classroom already. My class is very used to looking at it. We look at it every day and we go through what's coming up during that day. But you can do it just at home, even just for the morning. So you can either print out little cards that would show like a child brushing their teeth, a child using a little toilet so they know to go use the bathroom, get dressed, eat breakfast, or even more fun, the kids really enjoy if you take a picture of them doing the things that you want them to do in the morning. So after they get up in the morning, what's the first thing you want them to do? Okay, maybe at your house they get dressed right away. So take a picture of an outfit so they know that the first thing they have to do is get dressed. Then they go down and they eat their breakfast. And then they go brush their teeth, use the bathroom, get their backpack, get their shoes on, and we're out the door. And if you have each of those steps laid out for them, they can constantly be looking, okay, I know I did this. I know now what's coming next. On the screen, you can see there's kind of two different ways that they laid out a visual schedule, but there's a lot of different ways you can lay out. They've got them on a jump ring where they're just flipping to the next ring. You can put them in a row. In my classroom, I have them on with Velcro so they can take the pictures off after, or we can mix them up after if the day looks different than the day before, or you can even have the child take them off after they've completed that one and put it into a little box. Okay, this one's done. Now I can see what the next step is. You want to make sure it's done with pictures because kids see in pictures. They can't track it as easily if they can't see what it is. It allows for them to have some comfort in knowing, okay, I can see this and I know what's coming up, and try to keep it in a consistent order for the most part. Every day, I know these are the steps that I'm going to take to get to that spot. You want to keep it somewhere that the kids can see it and that they can have easy access to what they're doing so that it's put more on them rather than on you. So it's not you saying, well, look right here, you can say to them, go check your schedule. What are you going to do next? What's the next step in what you need to get done in order to accomplish this task of, say, getting to school in the morning? You can also use it to set expectations. So Mindy, if you would go to the next slide, please. You can do a calendar even and this works even for older kids too, that the kids know what's coming up. I know one of the hardest things that I see from kids is when they don't know, is today a day I stay for nap? I don't know what I'm doing when I get picked up after school. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's picking me up from school. So having like a visual schedule or even a little calendar allows for you to kind of prep the child ahead of time. This is what to expect. And when we know what to expect, it's much easier for us to anticipate and to be prepared. And then our brain doesn't get back there where our clacker is going nonstop because we're anxious we don't know what's going on. When we know what's going on, we know how to prepare for it. We can stay calm. We know what to expect. If you would go to the next slide. This was just a little simple calendar that I made up. The days of the week on the side really are not for the kids. That's more for the adult. It helps me because I can read them. But on Sunday and on Saturday and Sunday, I put a little house there. Those are days that they don't come to school. So maybe on Sunday you go to church with your family and you could put the little church there. Then the kids know, okay, this is a day I'm not at school, but as a family, we go to church. On Monday through Friday, I just have the little St. Paul's logo. They know, that's school. I put nap down for those 2 days that maybe this child just naps on Tuesday and Thursday. The little clip on the side there, you can move up and down so that they know what the next day is. This is where we're at for today. And you can reference that in the morning. Okay, let's look at what today is. Today is a school day. You're going to nap at school. And after nap, we're going to take time and we're going to play some family games. Then the child knows what to expect. The little star on there, I always keep one little special tile or one card that you can put in when something's going to be different that day. So maybe you're going to grandma and grandpa's that night, or they're going over to a friend's after school. And you can put that in there, and then they know that it's something different. And then talk to them about it ahead of time so that they know what to expect. Like the Easter egg hunt, if you had an Easter egg hunt over Easter this weekend, showing them that we're going to do something special, and then set out the expectations before you have that event. We're going to go find lots of eggs, and when we get home, you can pick out 2 eggs that you want to eat the candy from. The rest we're going to save for another day after school. That way they know when they get home exactly what to expect. And it doesn't become a power struggle because they've already anticipated what's going to happen next. So the visual schedule or the visual calendar is an easy way to help your child know what's coming next, to create patterns that helps the brain stay in that executive state. It helps them to be calm. It helps them to take control or ownership of what's going on because they can even work with you to set out your schedule. If you want to have all the steps broken down, well, we need to accomplish these things, you can ask them to help you set out, well, what do we want to do first today? And put it in an order that would work for both of you. So that way they have control over some of the things that are going on too. And we all know kids like control. As long as they're getting shoes on, really doesn't matter what color shoes, doesn't matter, we want them to accomplish this task. If they get dressed before they brush their teeth or if they brush their teeth first, as long as they're accomplishing all the tasks, it works. We just want them to have some of that control, and we want them to know what needs to get done in order to make it successful.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bruns. Are there any questions for Mrs. Bruns about the visual schedule? We've seen this tool be incredibly helpful for kids who really need to know what's coming and just for all of our kids in general. All right, next up, Mrs. Mincher is going to share about the safe spot.
Hi, thanks everyone for hanging in there with us. So at St. Paul's and as part of our conscious discipline implementation, we have something called a safe spot at school. But a safe spot does not have to be just at school. So what is a safe spot? It is a designated area and it has things, tools to help a child regulate their emotions. It sounds a lot like timeout in that it's a removed space, but it's definitely different. The intent of a safe spot assumes, like Emma said, that your child is having a hard time. Your child is not giving you a hard time. Timeout assumes that your child is giving you a hard time. And most of the time, timeout is really just beneficial for the adult because it removes the child from them, from the situation that's causing the adult the trigger. So a safe spot has a different intent than timeout. And I'm not saying that, there's never a time or a place for timeout, because that is obviously, that is a family choice that you make. But the thing that makes a safe spot different is that it is kind of a sacred space for a child to go to. And in order to implement it into your home, you need to get a few things and you need to prep a few things. It's not something that you're going to be able to explain and knock out in one day. But the safe spot is really helpful for those kiddos that have a really hard time coming back to that upstairs brain. They can't seem to shake that, being in that downstairs brain state, and they really need extra tools besides our words and besides our attention in order to get themselves more regulated. So this is a spot that does that. All right, Mindy, you can go to the next slide. So again, this safe spot assumes that your child is having a hard time. You're not encouraging them to suppress the feelings. You are encouraging them to go to this space willingly and to help sort these feelings out and to have them in a safe way. But the safe spot will only work if you can get your kid there, right? So you do want it to be inviting. You want it to be a place that does not involve any kind of stigma. It is never a punishment to go to the safe spot. You are never forced to go there. It's a place to go and regroup. As soon as you make them go there, it becomes timeout and you're removing them for your own benefit. So you really have to come at this with the intent to support your child and not just to remove them. It kind of does both, but it depends on where you put your safe spot. That quote at the bottom about the difference between discipline and punishment, I like to think of it as learning to be a mature, emotionally intelligent person takes a lot of practice, and it's something that you have to learn, and it's a scaffolded experience. You wouldn't be angry at a toddler learning to walk. You wouldn't shame them for falling down. They're trying, and when they fall, you help them up and you encourage them and you have another go at it. So if you kind of reframe your brain that way, it's much easier to set your feelings aside and do this for your child, because in the end, that's really what we're trying to do. Mindy, you can skip the next slide because we kind of went through that. It's just, again, when your kid's having that meltdown, they are having a hard time and they are down in that downstairs brain. So this is a space that they can go to help them get back up those stairs. These are what safe spots look like at school. They don't all look the same, although many of them are in these little wooden cubes. I just kind of went around and took pictures of accessible ones. There's a lot of visual aids. There's also a lot of tactile aids. Tactile experiences really help reset the brain and regulate it. So you might have like these little poppets that I feel like you can get for free anywhere these days. Those are always good. Muscle rollers. These are, I think, like from a sporting store that you're supposed to roll on sore muscles, but it's that deep pressure that kids crave, especially when they're feeling very dysregulated. Like just a squeezy stress ball. And you can, like fill a balloon with sand, or you can use a toilet paper roll and make it into some kind of a breathing tube. You can use what you have. And honestly, the more involved you make the kids in making these tools will probably keep them from becoming destroyed in a fit of anger. If they've built it, it's a lot easier for them to preserve it. I have just random, like little earmuffs from the workshop that kind of help kids when they put the earphones on, they hear their own breathing better. And it's just, they don't realize that, but it does work. Something soft, something to see, something to touch, anything that they might need. My secret weapon is just a bottle of scented lotion, because when they put it on, they always put their hands over their face and take a deep breath in, and that regulates their breathing, which gets the oxygen back up to this brain. It's all rooted in brain science. So you are not indulging your child by allowing them to have these feelings in a safe place. You are helping them. And your job in this safe space is first to create it, again, with their help. And second, your job is going to have to be as kind of the coach. So Mindy, you can go to that next slide. Use what you have to first create the space. It might, if your child helps you with it, it might not be that cute, but by golly, it'll get the job done. You can put glitter in a jar and use it as a breathing jar. Whatever tools you choose, cater them to your child, right? If you have a thrower, maybe don't put a glass jar in there. If you have somebody who really can zone out looking at those gloopy tubes and that helps them get their breathing under control, maybe put one of those in there. Cater it toward your child. But the key thing is going to be that you have to introduce each tool. And the difference is that it's not a toy, it's a tool. You're going to have to introduce them and then teach the kid how to use them. So if you go to the next slide, Mindy, you don't need all these things. Don't look at this list and freak out and jump on Amazon. Just, again, use what you have. And each thing you introduce to them, you need to show them when they are calm, how to use them. You can put on your acting hat and say, oh, I'm so angry. How could I use this mirror to see how to calm myself down? Or books that soothe them. Even picture books of themselves, you know, if they are having big feelings, you can take pictures of them. Visually stimulating or calming items, a stuffy or soft blanket. In many of these classrooms, the items that go into the safe spot stay there. So you're not running up to bed to get your favorite lovey to then bring back down, which you can do. But typically the tools that we put in our safe spaces here tend to stay there so that if a child is having a big emotion, they know right where to find it. And you can kind of use that to your discretion. You can also, if you go to the next slide, Mindy, you can also bring a safe spot with you. It does not have to be a little cube. It does not have to be a rug with a cozy pillow area. It can just be one of these little pencil boxes that you put a timer. And when the timer runs out, I'm going to come and talk to you and maybe we can work out a plan together. Or the stress ball or anything that will fit in there that helps calm and regulate your child can go in that portable safe spot. Because a lot of these, big feelings happen when you're out of your routine, which means you're out in the world. And so having a little toolkit, it helps you do a job, and you have to coach them that going to the safe place is doing a big job of figuring out how to have your feelings safely. Your eventual hope is that this safe spot becomes internalized. And Mindy, if you could go to that last slide there. You are helping your child internalize this safe spot. It goes from a physical location to something that goes on in inner dialogue. And the way that children's inner dialogue begins is with your verbal words. So you have got to channel your Annie Reid, and you have got to, again, use that DNA model, describing, naming, and acknowledging the feelings, and then prompt them to use their safe space. When they have practiced it in a calm state, they're going to want to go back there because they're going to remember it as a safe and helpful place for them. Again, you shouldn't ever force your child to go to the safe spot. And for me, that's one of the hardest things because it's so clearly helpful to them once they get there, but getting them there can be a challenge. You can go with them to the safe spot. It can be a place for you to go together and work out feelings. But you just really have to avoid the Bobby Knight in you that wants to throw the chair and send them to their room. This is, again, a tool, and it will have long-term benefits if you use it correctly, because eventually your kids are going to feel the triggers, name their own feelings, and then acknowledge that they need the safe space to calm down. And then hopefully they stop needing it. And that means you've done your job and that the safe space has done their job. But I'm betting that a lot of you adults have a safe space that you don't know about. Like I discovered earlier that mine is my kitchen pantry because I can close the doors, it's dark and quiet, and there's a stash of chocolate, and I can recenter. So your safe space becomes an internal process. But you do, as we know, children are visual learners that need that tactile feedback in order to feel their feelings. When your child is triggered, the things that, and again, several of the other presenters have mentioned this, but you have to know your own trigger. You have to know, oh gosh, I am triggered by screaming, or I am triggered by whining, and I can tell my child is having a hard time. I'm not going to let it get to me. There's nothing wrong with me as a parent. There's nothing wrong with my child, but here's what I'm going to do to support them. And the safe space we've discovered in the classroom is, sometimes there's a line to get into it. And sometimes kids want to go there when they're not having big feelings. It's just a comforting space for them, and that's okay too. There's all kinds of breathing techniques and visuals that you can make or print, but if you go to the Conscious Discipline website, a lot of it is free. And on there, I've written, I am, I calm, I feel, I choose, and I solve. So that sounds like a lot of words, but really you're doing all of them already. You are naming, describing, and acknowledging the feelings. And then you're moving on to this next step of what can I do to regain my composure, and helping your child to do that. And so these are all things that can help. And you know, things that work one day may not work the next day, and that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That just means your child is learning and that you're learning with them. And I say every eye roll means you're doing something right. So just hang in there. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask away.
Thank you, Mrs. Mincher. I will actually stop recording right now so that if anyone has a question and wants to be vulnerable, they can feel confident to do that.